Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to the 2020 River and Ocean Film Festival. This is our 7th year holding the film festival, but of course the first year in which we've held the festival online. Typically the film festival is held in the city of Forks at the beautiful Rainforest Arts Center. But of course, due to COVID-19, we couldn't hold the festival this year in person, so we are bringing it to you online. We will be bringing you the festival as a series of 3 episodes, each posted in subsequent weeks starting on September 17th. So what you are about to see is episode 1, and we hope you enjoy it. Now, the River and Ocean Film Festival is co-sponsored by the North Pacific Coast Marine Resources Committee and Washington Sea Grant. And I'm your host, Ian Miller. I work for Washington Sea Grant. The film festival has a very simple premise. We want to bring you short films, less than 20 minutes, that are relevant in some way, shape, or form to the natural or social dimensions of the west end of the Olympic Peninsula. Filmmakers from all over the world submit films to the festival. They're reviewed by a review committee who score them based on those criteria. And the films you are about to see are those that rose to the top of the films that were submitted. This is an open submission film festival. You don't have to be a professional filmmaker to submit a film, so we encourage you to submit the films you're making, whether they be professionally made or simply done on your cell phone. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to present our first film of the 2020 River and Ocean Film Festival. This film is called When Goats Fly, and it was submitted by Eliza Goode of Olympic National Park. Now, Eliza is one of the film festival stalwarts. She submitted her first film to the 2016 festival. That was called The Smell of Cedars Steeped in Rain, which she made as a graduate student. The film went on to win Best in Show honors that year, and Eliza went on to working for the Olympic National Park, where her duties include making films that allow people to see deeper into the park than they otherwise would. This film is a perfect example of that, hot off the presses, and documents Olympic National Park's recent work to reduce the population of goats in Olympic National Park. Please enjoy When Goats Fly.
I could watch mountain goats forever. They're one of my favorite creatures, and it's just unfortunate that they happen to have been introduced here.
In national parks, we try to maintain the flora and fauna that have been here for eons. And we know that ecosystems are always evolving. However, we know that when human beings move things into and out of them, it can have really detrimental effects.
The Olympic Mountains are this really unique ecosystem, and you look at us from space or from just aerial photographs, it jumps out at you that we are just this mountain island that's really not connected to any other mountain system. So it's not surprising that we have unique species assemblage.
These goats came before this was a park, and they were introduced for humans to have another game species to hunt. And we don't have hunting in the national park.
They are very persistent in seeking salt, and because they both have horns and they're more socially aggressive, they can be dangerous. So the time was to act now, and then kind of the perfect storm. The state needed goats to restore the population in the Cascades.
There are isolated populations of mountain goats in the North Cascades on National Forest lands. They're at such low numbers, there was concern that they would not be able to rebound.
That's why when we had the opportunity to jumpstart these populations by putting new animals in there, I think that was a good idea.
That makes the population where they are native more robust and more able then to adapt to changing climate or other factors. So it will really help goats overall.
I think intact ecosystems are important because they are a place where you can understand the interconnectedness of living things. It offers insight into the diversity and the interdependence of things. I think as you learn more about a place, you have a deeper connection and a better understanding that it's not just any plant, or not just any animal, or not just any forest.
It was really important for the Forest Service to partner with the National Park Service having a mission of having only native species, and the Olympic National Forest having a small population of the mountain goats. The animals do not know the boundaries. They are going to go into the national forest and into the national park.
Land management in the United States has multiple uses and multiple paradigms, all of which are valid, and often they're conflicting. And so they all come together and agree on one project. That's, a fairly big one. It takes some time.
Parks and the national forests, in amongst their mission, is trying to preserve balance to the ecosystem for the American public now and into the future.
Planning at the front end was wonderful. People have found their roles. Every day people are coached through their roles, so there's no lack of communication, no confusion. So it's been a very, very smooth project.
That is one thing that I think it's always underappreciated, but the overhead positions that put the thought and energy into the planning, that has made this run smoothly, and good on them.
Every single detail has been considered, and it's making for a very smooth operation that I'm quite pleased with what I'm seeing. No one will deny that this is a pretty stressful thing for goats to be scooped up and brought to our mobile processing staging area and then put on trucks and then helicoptered into their new home. We're not denying that that's stressful, so we're doing all we can to mitigate that, to provide as much care and comfort while we handle them, reduce all the stressful stimuli, reduce as much noise as we can, reduce the handling as much as we can, provide them with some medications and some IV fluids to help them on that trip over to the Cascades. So it feels good to try to make things as good as we can for these goats.
To see the intense compassion given to every animal that comes in has been really exceptional.
Veterinarians that work with wildlife are different, and there's not a lot of us, and we have very broad skill sets, and we do this work not because it is financially advantageous, because it isn't, but we do it because we care, and we value the passion of the people that we work with. In this kind of environment, you work with people as a team, and you use their skills, and you form new friendships, and it leads to improvement because everyone has great ideas, and it leads to relationships that last forever.
It's a really cool group of people, really sort of enthusiastic and sort of high energy people who are practical with a good sense of humor, and I've just really enjoyed the teamwork and camaraderie that you get to experience on these. I love it.
We're all really passionate about this. We all really want to see this be successful.
Well, we faced this challenge of we knew we were going to have to drive the goats from the peninsula to the Cascades somehow. So we put out this call for folks who would be interested in doing this on a volunteer basis. And for the most part, it worked out real well. And I think most of the drivers, while the hours were long and they spent a lot of time waiting for what little action they got to see, I think that they knew that was what they'd signed up for. And I think most of them got a good experience. They enjoyed seeing the processing of the goats in the park, the veterinarians, and I think they enjoyed seeing the helicopter come and pick the crates up and then going off to their new homes.
I love seeing the videos that the release team sends us, with them coming out of the crates and bounding up the hills, the moms with their babies following it on their heels, and it's beautiful goat habitat, and just knowing that the odds are probably pretty good that they're going to successfully reestablish in those areas of the Cascades and augment the small populations over there.
I think it's the notion of their role in an ecosystem and how they interact with other living things there. It is difficult for people to think about some mountain goats losing their lives through this project. I hope there's an understanding of that this is for the health of the landscape.
We think primarily in large systems. I think in terms of large elements of time and space. So I like to think about populations. To somebody who only thinks about individual animals, the way we talk about things might seem crude or uncaring. If they saw us work with the individual animals, I think they would think differently.
Being a land steward, it never leaves you. When you finish up your day at work, it's always with you.
I really like the work in that it's focused on populations and ecosystems. I think that's really where sort of our society needs to be increasing our focus, because I think that's really more important than anything in keeping our planet healthy.
I mean, if we had to undo things, we would have never introduced mountain goats. We would have never introduced brook trout. There are a lot of things that we'd have done differently, given hindsight. One interesting thing that I think about some is Washington has native bighorn sheep, But all the bighorn sheep in Washington now were a result of translocations. In the early 1900s, every single bighorn sheep population in the state was extirpated. But people who came before me 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago had the foresight to get bighorn sheep from other places and put them there. And now people have the opportunity to see them, to enjoy them. And so I kind of view myself as a legacy of that. What I'm doing now is something that I hope people 20, 30, 40 years from now will be able to say, oh yeah, we have pretty healthy goat populations throughout the North Cascades now.
I have been a wildlife biologist with the Forest Service for over 25 years, and this has been really one of the highlights of my career, to be a part of such a large-scale project with such generational impact.
The hope is that we as a species come to grips with how to live more sustainably on our planet. And the hope is that an animal like a Rocky Mountain goat can inspire young people especially to care.
Humans have such influence on what happens on this planet, and I believe that's a great responsibility to acknowledge our presence and our impact, and to decide as a society what we value, what we want to see, what we want to pass on to future generations. And this is just a small piece of that.
The second film in the 2020 River and Ocean Film Festival is called Coldwater Connection, and it's presented and submitted by Shane Anderson, owner of North Fork Studios. Now, Shane is no stranger to filmmaking on the Olympic Peninsula or to the River and Ocean Film Festival. Shane, in fact, had 2 films accepted into last year's festival, one called The Salmon Coast and another one called A Sustainable Way Forward for Fish and Fishermen. This year's film, Coldwater Connection, was filmed for the Wild Salmon Center and is a centerpiece of their outreach for the Coldwater Connection campaign, which focuses on removing over 4,000 fish barriers from rivers and creeks on the west side of the Olympic Peninsula. There's a reason that Coldwater Connection was the top-ranked film amongst our film review committee. It's local, it's beautiful, and brings the viewer to places that most of us may never get to go to in person. Please enjoy Coldwater Connection.
This tributary holds a special place in my heart in that we were literally standing on the banks of the creek staring at the culvert when out of the depth of the plunge pool at the base of the culvert, 2 adult coho who were trying to make their way to their spawning grounds were stuck. Both of these fish jumped up multiple times trying to get into that culvert. The Coldwater Connection campaign is working to remove the barriers on the Olympic Peninsula to bring salmon and steelhead back home. 50% of the state's non-listed populations under the Federal Endangered Species Act call the Olympic Peninsula home. It is a salmon stronghold. We are what some consider a climate refuge. If you look at climate projections into the 2080s, we're going to have some of the coldest and cleanest waters left for salmon in the Pacific Northwest. We have a lot of incredible habitat, both within the National Forest and Olympic National Park, but we really need to shore up the strongholds of the Olympic Peninsula by opening up these barriers, removing these blockages so that salmon and steelhead can get back into their home habitats.
And this culvert is acting like a barrier, just like a dam would. And fish cannot go upstream to get to colder water, to get to their summer refuge. So water temperature can be an issue too, but this is a classic example of what we're trying to fix. And the first thing we're doing with this project is identifying these barriers that are not yet documented. So we're walking all the county roads and basically identifying every culvert we come across, and we'll measure those. We want to make sure these fish have freedom to migrate up and downstream as they want. So far we've surveyed 440. We probably have another couple hundred to go. We're finding dozens of undocumented barriers.
In Washington state as a whole, there are over 20,000 documented barriers and even more that are undocumented. On the Olympic Peninsula alone, we have over 4,000 documented culverts and barriers to fish migration, mini dams that are impeding the passage of our salmon and steelhead. We are trying to be strategic in the barriers that we're removing to ensure that we're prioritizing reestablishing connection to some of the coldest water refugios that we have still available.
This is Colby Creek, and it's a pretty large tributary to the Dickey River, and we've got 4 culverts down here that are blocking a couple miles of habitat upstream here. Rainier Inc., the landowner, has agreed to let us pull these 4 culverts out and leave this as an open channel. So this stream, Colby Creek, will be restored back to its most natural habitat it can be in. And all the trees that are getting removed, that are hazard trees for the project, will be placed in stream for more cover for the salmon and to produce a more complex habitat. This is a habitat for juvenile, adult, and all life stages of salmon here. These little guys, as soon as this culvert is out of here, they'll be able to access upstream as well, and they just have miles and miles of habitat opportunity up there. And more specifically, here they have a nice channel to be in, but upstream they have access to wetlands and more off-channel refugia for them to be able to survive to smolthood and be able to go out to the ocean. You know, we're making jobs both at the level for me as a sponsor of the project and helping landowners get funding, and then as having the contractors do it. And then after the contractors get out of there, we'll have kids come volunteer from the school and do plantings. Projects like these passage opening projects are immediate successes. We see salmon utilizing them as soon as they're coming back the next season, and oftentimes juveniles are utilizing them immediately after the barrier is removed. It's very, very low input for a very high output for salmon habitat.
The Coldwater Connection campaign is bringing together partners on the Olympic Peninsula to remove fish barriers, ultimately reconnecting 150 miles, allowing fish to get back home to some of the most important cold, clean water reaches. Watershed restoration is not only working to recover our wild salmon and steelhead populations, it's also helping to recover our coastal communities and our coastal economies. I really believe that the Olympic Peninsula is one of our last best hopes for salmon and steelhead in the Pacific Northwest, and we have an opportunity to get recovery right here, to restore these populations to something more resemblant of historic health. But we need to get to work.
The third and final film in episode 1 of the 2020 River and Ocean Film Festival is called The Power of Kelp. And it was submitted by Meg Chadsey, a colleague of mine at Washington Sea Grant, and was made by Paul Hillman, a Seattle-based videographer. Now, the seeds of this film were first planted in 2018 by a University of Washington student, Fahad Alda-Ajani, who wanted to create a film about a project funded by the Paul Allen Family Foundation that focused on utilizing kelp to improve water conditions around shellfish farms. After Fahad graduated, the project was subsequently picked up by Paul Hillman with funding from the Puget Sound Restoration Fund. The film was released just this summer, so it is also hot off the shelf. Of special note in this film are the unique hand-drawn animations. Those are by Zoe Van Dwievenbode, who was a graduate student at the University of Washington at the time. Please enjoy A Power of Kelp.
So here we are in the Pacific Northwest. We're sitting in North Hood Canal, and we are just thinking about all the wonderful uses of seaweeds. I have this grand vision that will replace all the corn grown in Iowa with kelp grown on the Pacific coast.
It's probably one of the best possible things you could farm in this kind of environment. You don't have to water it, apply pesticides or fertilizers or anything. It's literally an input-free crop.
We're growing sugar kelp out here. It's just one of many species that are available. For the grower in the Pacific Northwest, we actually sit in the largest diversity of seaweeds practically in the world.
And we're just starting to realize all the benefits of growing kelp in this region.
So I've been a shellfish farmer now for about 30 years, and about 10 years or so ago, we really started noticing in the hatchery environment that the oyster larvae just weren't thriving. And it all turned out to be issues associated with this emerging global problem of ocean acidification.
Our human carbon dioxide emissions are literally acidifying our oceans. And this is a global problem, but it's particularly bad here in the Pacific Northwest. And here in Puget Sound, we've got vulnerable animals like oysters and other shell-forming organisms that are having a hard time maintaining their shells as the seawater that they live in becomes more corrosive. So in 2013, the Paul Allen Family Foundation challenged people to come up with out-of-the-box ways to address ocean acidification. And Joth Davis and I and Betsy Peabody with the Puget Sound Restoration Fund and a couple of other scientists, we got together and pitched an idea to this contest that was based on the concept of phytoremediation. Kelp, which is a very fast-growing algae, has the power to absorb a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide and other nutrients out of the water as it grows. So we wanted to see if we could harness this power of kelp to actually mitigate the effects of ocean acidification locally, here in a small part of Puget Sound, about the size of a shellfish farm.
So behind me in the middle section is where we grow kelp, and on the perimeter you see long strings of black buoys. From those we're hanging shellfish, and oysters specifically.
And we recruited a crack team of scientists and aquaculture experts to conduct an experiment at Joth's farm. This team installed a football field-sized array of submerged grow lines, planted it out with kelp seedlings, and deployed sensors to detect changes in seawater chemistry that might come about as a result of the growing kelp. The kelp grew really well, but it turns out the currents here were too fast for it to measurably improve seawater chemistry. So a key take-home from this experiment is that if we're hoping to use kelp to mitigate ocean acidification locally, it's really critical to look for optimal conditions and monitor sites to make sure that mitigation is actually happening. We also learned that when you're cultivating kelp, you've got to be thinking ahead. By the end of our first growing season, we had an enormous crop. What we didn't have was a plan for what to do with it. Fortunately, Eli Wheat, an agroecology expert at the University of Washington and the owner of Skyroot Farm on Whidbey Island nearby, came to the rescue. Where we saw 14,000 pounds of homeless kelp, Eli saw captured carbon and nutrients. So Eli offered to have us deliver the entire harvest to his farm And then he would do experiments on how to incorporate that kelp into the soil to improve productivity.
My background as an ecologist is in thinking about systems. And so when we started farming here, we wanted to take our understanding of ecology to approach the farm from a systems thinking perspective. And so the Kelp project just really fit into that bigger vision of nutrient recycling on the farm. It's like this incredible cross ecosystem connection. So you're growing kelp in the water to reduce ocean acidification and benefit bivalve growth. And we can then take that kelp, which has been so beneficial in the marine environment, and bring it onto our farm and use it to increase the productivity of our farm as a system. So it felt like, wow, this is a totally amazing opportunity.
There's no downside of growing seaweed. You could grow for biofuels, we can grow seaweeds for fertilizers, compost, and I think the highest and best use is growing seaweeds for food.
Chefs and consumers are clamoring for this new, exciting, sustainable, delicious product.
And who knows what's going to happen in the next 20 years. The OA problem hopefully will get better. And in the meantime, I think that growing seaweeds has all these co-benefits that we hope will assist in culturing shellfish like oysters. We know it sucks up carbon, we know it sucks up nitrogen, and we definitely feel when we harvest kelp from this site, we're making a difference. And that means a lot to me as a long-term shellfish farmer in the area. And as I said, more power to kelp.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes episode 1 of the 2020 River and Ocean Film Festival. There will be 2 more episodes. Episode 2 will be released on September 24th, and we hope you join us for episode 2 of the 2020 River and Ocean Film Festival.